held the hands of the Commission, unfortunately, mainly virtually, but have advised us, have all the way led us in our work on this commission. Jasmine is a Barking and Dagenham resident. She also works for and in the local community in Barking and Dagenham. She is a survivor, but she told me today she prefers the term an overcomer, which I think is very cool. So I'm going to hand over now to Jasmine. Take it away, Jasmine.
Hello, good evening. Am I here?
You're there.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're here.
Amazing.
Go for it.
I'm all good. Okay, so this spoken word is called I'm Still Standing. And firstly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I truly, truly appreciate this. I'm humbled and feel super blessed. And yeah, I hope this really just touches somebody and encourages someone. Okay. I'm still standing, clothed in strength. I am still standing. I said I am clothed in strength and I am still standing. My tragedy turned triumph. I'm still standing. Although more than once, more than twice, I could have been her, I could have been she, that could have been me. I could have been that 1 out of 3 who are brutally murdered each week, you see. That could have been me. Now, what would they have told my baby? I'm still standing. All these wounds in this battlefield, but I can't blame me, you see. Under the power of deceit is where I found my feet. And deep it, I was just a teen. I was caught up in the cycle of abuse, but now I am free. And abuse doesn't define me. The hand of the wicked really tried to deter me, divert and distract me out of my destiny. But so much grace was and is upon me. This day I speak, breathe, and live peace, delivering the message that there is hope beyond bruises. And all that brokenness, those tears, excruciating pain is not in vain. I'm still standing. Tried and tested, abused and molested, hurt and rejected. You see, this is my truth, my life, my story, my journey. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still healing. But just like Maya Angelou said, still I rise. I rise and I am rising. Like air, I rise. A pillar, a warrior, an overcomer. I stand, I rise. Like the sun meets the morning, I am rising. Operating under peace. Peace is my gauge. I'm still standing. So let me fix this crown upon my head and gently remind myself that I am blessed. I am power, a conqueror. More than enough, and so are you. Hardship comes our way, but I bring a word of encouragement this day. You are created to grow, so take as much time out to put time into your soul. You are created to grow and glow. You are created to grow and glow. I said you are created to grow and glow. So run, go, get it, run, go, go. That's the reign of heaven. Yes, that's your mess turned to a message, a test turned testimony. I'm still standing. There's a roar bubbling up inside of me, and that's for my family, society, community, and globally. I believe and receive that I am free. Believe and receive that you are free. Caterpillar turned butterfly. So let faith stir and quicken our spirits. Let the voice of hope ring louder in our ears like never before. And allow true, patient, kind, gentle love sink into the depths of our hearts as we, this army, break the silence. Let's rise together to intervene in breaking these chains of abuse and deceit. So use your voice, exercise your power, Empower, encourage, enlighten, inspire, and consciously remind yourself that love is the greatest tool and love wins. And the time is now. Barking and Dagenham, let's restore, rebuild, and revive our land. Thank you.
Whoa, I don't know what to say about that. Jasmine, the overcomer. You are still standing. That was incredible. Well done. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And I hope you can see the chat, because there's a lot of love and thanks for you in the chat. And everybody like me really, really appreciates the words. So I'm now introducing Councillor Maureen Warby, who is Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health Integration at Barking and Dagenham. Maureen was really the person who, I guess, fought for this commission to happen. She is a feminist, she is a sister, and she has really promoted the work of the commission, and I am very grateful. Thank you, Maureen, for inviting me to lead it, because it was a real honour. Over to you, Maureen.
Thank you, and welcome all of you. I'm not quite sure how I ended up with the short straw, having to follow that amazing piece of work and introduction from Jessica. And I suppose actually Jessica and the other women survivors you'll hear tonight actually make me feel very humble. And that's okay, but I have to acknowledge that. I'm also ashamed. I'm ashamed that we've got a system that hasn't listened to them properly for a long time. But equally, I'm really proud that as a borough, Barking and Dagenham have stepped up and are trying to accept and take forward the challenge that these women have given us. We've got a proud history here in Barking and Dagenham, and our leader normally quotes this, but I'll get to do it. That proud history of women who have influenced the country, been strong and had a voice. That goes from Mary Wollstonecraft through to the Ford machinists, and then on to Jo Richardson, who was the first Minister for Women. But what is shaming on us all, 36 years ago, Jo was championing the domestic abuse and the fact that we all hid it under the carpet, and that is still going on today. And that's something we need to acknowledge, how long this battle to get survivors heard has been going on. So apologies to those of you who've heard this before, but just a quick, why did I decide to champion this among my colleagues? Not that they took much persuasion, but back in 2018, a woman called Karen was murdered by her husband. Not unusual, as Jessica just said. The thing that really upset me was a message appeared on Facebook early in the morning saying lots of police in such and such a road. Within 5 minutes, people were posting, I hope that's not Karen. And it was Karen. And the community knew, but the system didn't. And that is shocking in this day and age. Equally, as the report talks about, we did a survey among our year 10 students, and I don't think our students are any different from young people across the country. 27% of those young people said it was okay to give your partner a slap. And that wasn't just the boys, that was the girls as well. And those two things made me say, enough is enough. We have to do something about this. As a council, we have had domestic abuse as a priority for a while, but it's clear from things like that that we weren't having the effect that we wanted to. So we did set up the commission. We wanted the Commission to look at that thorny issue, not necessarily what services were we delivering, but why was the domestic abuse normalised within our community? And what we wanted them to help us as national experts is seek a way ahead, seek something different. What could we do that would address this? And we also wanted to produce a blueprint for others, because if we could use the knowledge of these experts to come up with a new approach, then we want to share that, and we want that to be experienced across the country. What I am pleased to say that the Commission has come up with a report that has been, as Polly mentioned, survivor-led, focuses on the survivor, has been co-produced with the survivor, and puts at the forefront, and I hope you picked that up from the message, we believe you, that what we all have to do is listen to survivors. They can tell us what we need to do. It's not for us to tell them what we're going to do for them. So the Commission has given us a stepped approach. It's not expecting, thankfully, that we do everything tomorrow. And so we've got a programme that we can deliver with our local survivors, listening to them, working with them to work out what's going to work. And it's been brilliant working with the people on the Commission and also with people from our borough that has made this real. So you don't want to listen to me, you want to listen to real people going forward. But I just want to make these 3 pledges from the council in Barking and Dagenham. We want to make this work, and we will. We must make a difference, and we will. But with you, we need to shout out loud to all survivors in our community, in the whole country. We believe you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Maureen. And you can see why we had, why Barking and Dagenham had the impetus to make this happen, because of that level of commitment from elected members from the council. I'm really happy now to be able to introduce Nicole Jacobs, who is the Designate Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales. Thank you, Nicole, for your ongoing interest in the work of the Commission. It's been great. And Nicole's going to give us the national perspective. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks so much for joining us, Nicole.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. And I have to say, I have really been following this commission. I can remember the launch event really clearly in my mind, because I think we had no idea what was ahead of us. And I remember, as a newly appointed commissioner, there's a lot of talk of commissioners and around. So there's the newly appointed commissioner for England and Wales. I came along to this event and I was so impressed by Councillor Warby, but also all of the leaders from Barking and Dagenham, and also, you know, Polly, obviously you and the incredible group of people, commissioners that you've brought to bear for this initiative. So I remember thinking then, and I think the same now, I'm desperately interested to understand, you know, to understand and hear the rest of the event tonight, and to read the report really carefully. And I just have to commend you all for all of the work you've done and the leadership. It's so unusual to have kind of an initiative of this kind, and bringing in people and using experts from the borough, but also from elsewhere. And so I just think it just shows the kind of ambition we really need to have for domestic abuse, for wider issues in relation to violence against women and girls. And I have a lot to learn, and I really mean that. I have a lot to learn from this this initiative. I have a lot to learn tonight, and I hope that we'll continue the conversation into the future. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the national context. I will have to do that, although I know we're all really wanting to get back to hearing much more about what's happened locally. But there is a connection. So we have the domestic abuse bill, which is just reaching committee stage of the House of Lords right now. So if there was ever a time that you wanted to write something on your list of things to do if you haven't done it already, please get in touch with your MPs, because what's happening now in the stages of the domestic abuse bill is they're going to be voting on the final amendments that have been brought through the House of Lords into the Commons very, very soon. And things that are not in the bill yet that really should be are things like provision of services for migrant women. There are some outstanding amendments to the bill that legislators really need to hear about, and they need to know how we feel about these issues. So please be in touch, and please, email or write to your MP and express what you feel about the domestic abuse bill and the changes that are needed. Having said all of that, there are some changes within the bill that I think will really impact the way we work. One is it gives the provision of my office, so I would love to tell you about that. And it gives a couple of powers in my office. One is to seek information from public bodies, so a duty to cooperate. We've never had this before in relation to domestic abuse, and so it's really important that we use those powers to best effect, to really get to the information we need to really encourage change. So if we were to say which mental health trusts are really playing their part in relation to domestic abuse, there's all sorts of examples we could list where we'd have curiosities about, are our services doing all of what they need to do to make domestic abuse everyone's business and prioritize like we want. So I really hope that some of those powers will help. A second power of the office will be making recommendations to public bodies that have to be responded to within 56 days. So again, just thinking about Councillor Warby's comments about, 30 some years ago, why are we still here? Why are we having some of these same conversations? And I totally agree with that. And I think some of the powers in the office will help us. It won't solve everything, but it will certainly help us be much more assertive and much clearer about the information we really want to see. And that has to be rooted in obviously what works for survivors, which is what is so unique about this commission. My office will be mapping services, so looking at where specialist services are, and there's many, many details about that are important, by and for services, gender specific services. There's a lot that we need to do to ensure that we have the kind of specialist domestic abuse services that we really need and what survivors tell us they really want. And we need to be able to map a little bit wider to see about the whole family, services for perpetrators to change, children, all of the things that we want to see in terms of a coordinated community response to domestic abuse. So with that said, that gives you some ideas and some of the I haven't talked about all of the changes the domestic abuse bill brings, but I suppose I've concentrated it very much on what my office will do and hope to do. But if there's anything I've learned in the first year of being the commissioner, having worked in services for almost my entire career, 20 some years before that, it is how the local level is the most important. The decisions you're making in Barking and Dagenham about the services you want, the approach you want, the kind of coordinated response to domestic abuse that you want is incredibly important. And the leadership at the local level is what makes a huge difference. So I've hired in my team a practice and partnerships team, because I feel so strongly about making sure what's working at the local level needs to influence national discussions, national funding. And so I would just encourage us to continue the conversation. And I would really like to be able to go to other areas and talk about this commission, talk about what you're doing in Barking and Dagenham, and really highlight this kind of progress and this it captures the ambition of really where we want to go. And so I just have to end by saying thank you for allowing me to listen in and to be here and meet and see you all, and just know how much I agree with this approach and how much I would like to understand going forward from you, how things are going, how you're implementing some of these changes, and continuing the kind of the believing approach, as Polly said, how perfect to sum up what we need in all services and with all of our approaches. I will definitely do a picture "We Believe You." I think that's a great approach to the whole initiative. And I would just say, please keep me and my office in mind in terms of how we can support your work, and how we can support really making sure that what you're doing in Barking and in Dagenham isn't so unusual that we can start seeing that in other areas, and what it would take to get there. So I will stop and listen as the rest of us are anxious to hear the rest of the presentations. But again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to have been invited and to be able to say a few words to you. I'll pass back over to you, Polly.
Hi, me again. Thank you so much, Nicole. And I would just like to reiterate what Nicole said about the domestic abuse bill. This is a critical time for survivors. There is so much potential in this bill. And if you're wondering about, what to write to your MP about, etc. Really, I would just say follow Nicole's Twitter feed, because you will find everything there. She is really clear about the amendments that are coming up to the bill, and some of them are really important. Some of them are about righting some injustices that will still remain within the bill. Having said that, it is an incredibly important step forward, particularly for the provision of specialist services for survivors. So it's my turn now, and I'm going to keep it incredibly short. I would urge you, the report is not super long, and I think it's pretty accessible. It really shows our survivor-led approach, and I would just urge you, please, to have a look at the report. Flo, I'm sure, can put a link in the chat to the Commission website and to the report itself. And I would just really urge everybody to have a look, and I can see that she just has posted it in the chat. And just before I make a few remarks about the Commission and its work, I just want to say a couple of thank yous. One is to the Commissioners, who have just been amazing in their wisdom, their knowledge, their listening, and their absolute united commitment to believing survivors and being led by survivors. And that has been really inspirational. The other people I just must thank is Flo Henry, the programme manager for the Commission, who, well, it just wouldn't have happened without Flo, frankly. So yeah, she's a total gift to local government, I've got to say, and she has just supported me all along. She's been amazing. And also the brilliant Amelia Poams, who has been with me on a bit of my journey, actually, at Shelter and at this Commission, but has really engaged with survivors. And if we've achieved our aim of being led by survivors, which I believe we have, it is down to Amelia and her work that we've done that. She has been everywhere in Barking and Dagenham. She's listened to young people from a hugely wide variety of communities. This is a highly diverse borough, and Amelia has spearheaded our efforts to really listen to survivors right across those diverse communities, and that's so important. I just wanted to also thank, I can't pick out everyone in Barking and Dagenham Council who have been brilliant, but I do want to just specifically thank Hazel North-Stevens, who is the lead commissioner at Barking and Dagenham for domestic abuse. This is one brave woman opening up the work of the council to a whole load of national experts. She is an expert herself. She has huge expertise. She's also somebody who wants to learn and has worked with us as a commission, as we've all learned together, and she has been absolutely incredible, and I really want to thank Hazel so much for the way that she's worked with the Commission. It's been absolutely exemplary, I would say. So all I really wanted to do was just talk about the principles that we as commissioners used when we were doing the work, when we were investigating what was already there, when we were trying to understand this cultural normalisation of domestic abuse that Maureen Warby talked about just now. Our first principle was we believe survivors. And that was, as you know already, at the absolute heart of all of our work. We just wanted to listen to survivors' experiences without judging them. And if we judged services in their response, we asked that question first. Were survivors believed, and did they know they were believed? And really, unfortunately, the answer was very, very often no. Our second principle was we are led by survivors. And what I mean by that is that the report, as you will see when you read it, it's structured under 7 outcomes. And those outcomes are based on how survivors told us they wanted their lives to change. So we asked them to express what the problem was, why things were so bad for them now, and then they expressed what their life would be like if it was better. And we structured the report and all of our work, in fact, in trying to understand how our community in Barking and Dagenham would move from the one to the other. So we were, as well as being survivor led, that led us in turn to be outcomes led. So we were all the time thinking about what is the outcome survivors want and how do we recommend that services and the community should get there. Our third principle was we change behaviour in order to change attitudes. So we are looking to achieve an attitudinal shift in this local community, and we hope this will ignite similar initiatives around the country. But changing attitudes is something that in the private sector, people spend millions on doing. What we wanted to look at in addition to that, and first, was the levers that a local authority and other local agencies can use to change behaviour, and that in turn will shift people's attitudes. And that was where our We Believe You becomes not just an empty statement, but it becomes a behaviour. And we want to really ensure, we want ways of ensuring that professionals in particular will behave in that way. And that in turn will shift attitudes. So we don't want to wait for long-term attitudinal change. We want to change behaviour first. Our fourth principle was we do not create harm. The report is quite carefully phased so that, for example, we don't create an expectation among survivors in the local community that they can come forward and then find that there isn't anything there to support them. And that's really important. So it is not uncommon, unfortunately, for initiatives in the domestic abuse sphere and in other spheres, in fact, as well, for initiatives to happen without a full picture. And actually, they can even create harm if you're not really careful. And so our fourth principle was we do not create harm. Our fifth principle was we are feminist and anti-racist. And our feminism and anti-racism are active. These aren't just beliefs. These are the way we do things. And we really wanted that to run through the whole report, because there isn't any social justice unless there is justice for women and unless there is racial justice. And finally, but by no means least, we are trauma informed. And that's important. Domestic abuse causes severe trauma. That trauma lasts over time. And it's really important that every touch point that survivors have with services understands that trauma and is able to respond to it in an appropriate way. Because every interaction with a survivor is an opportunity to help that person. And unless the response is trauma informed, that opportunity is all too often missed. So those were the principles underlying the report. And the reason I've focused on those is because, in a way, that approach is what I would like people who are at this virtual event who are not from Barking and Dagenham. Those principles are what I would most like people to take away, because I think if you follow those principles, and actually there is a separate report about how we did it, in case anyone else, any other locality does want to follow Barking and Dagenham's example, which would be brilliant. But those principles are really what the how we did it boils down to. The what we did you can read in the report itself, and I would really urge you to do so. So when I started speaking, I thanked Amelia Poans for the incredible work she's done as the Community Engagement Officer for the Commission. Amelia is also a spoken word artist. She's also a presenter on BBC Radio London, and her show is amazing. I love it. That's probably not a recommendation, to be honest with you, because I'm not cool enough to recommend a radio show, but I would still recommend Amelia's. It's absolutely brilliant, and I listen to it every week. It is fantastic. But Amelia is brilliant, and she is a spoken word artist, and she's going to speak to us now. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you, Polly, for the lovely introduction. Yes, I'm Amelia, and I was the former Community Engagement Officer on the Commission, and I had the honour of speaking with the survivors, overcomers that have experienced domestic abuse, and also the wider community. I have written a spoken word piece to almost sum up what I took from that learning. I'm a massive believer in empathy. So with this poem, I'm trying to bring everyone in the shoes of someone experiencing domestic abuse. And it's called, Why Don't You Just Leave? Why don't you just leave? Someone asks flippantly, not understanding the complexities of an abusive relationship, not understanding that having power and control over you is the motivation behind this. Insecurities drummed in your psyche, so many barriers keeping you from leaving. Told you will never survive on your own, and who will believe you? Told that this is what love feels like, that love, it hurts. And how can you expect a relationship to work if you just leave when things get tough? Confusing abuse and love, you never saw it coming, but they did. Abusers are very calculated. They will manipulate your perception of them. You believe they are so pleasant, you let them in, and then the subtleties begin. So small, you hardly notice. Their suggestions turn into demands, and you don't feel as if you're in harm, so you go along with it. Slowly, it becomes the norm, and it has to be their way. You feel like if you object, then they will get upset, so you can't have your say. There's something sinister that lingers in the air. Something isn't quite right, but you can't put your finger on it, so you almost forget it's there. They slowly weed themselves tightly around you, in your ear about what you can and cannot wear and who shouldn't be around you. You should dress more like this, and your friends aren't right for you, and your family need to mind their own business, acting like this is all within your best interest, isolating you so you become easier to control, intentionally cutting you off from the outside, but you don't know because this is something that has been happening gradually. They have managed to convince you that you don't want to see your friends or family. Your finances are very much dictated by them, even though it's your own money, and you find yourself struggling to pay the rent. Hold on, suddenly they have more control over your life than you do. And you've had enough, so you speak up. And that's when you recall a change. You can't understand how it got this way. They physically lash out in rage, and you're looking at them as they justify their ways. They apologize and bombard you with gifts, saying it's because of you why they're acting like this. Psychologically abused, you're left confused. You believe maybe you are the cause. Maybe this is what you deserve, and maybe this is what you've been asking for. You have no one else to talk to hear an outsider's view. The only conversation you have is between them and you. The cycle continues, and it's the same old thing. wearing away at you. The outside world has become a stranger, and you feel like you're the only person going through this and no one understands the danger, so you keep it pented in, almost protecting them. Maybe one day they will change, you reassure yourself. In the meantime, you are losing yourself. Your home has become a gallery of painful memories. You don't feel the same. You act in ways you can't describe. You struggle to find the words to articulate what's going on inside. Looking at the mirror at someone you don't recognize, you feel ashamed. But your main aim is to survive. Every day is another mountain to climb. You have become a master of predicting their next moves. It's easier to manage when you know what they are going to do. You speak to your doctor about how you are feeling, and their resolution is to prescribe you with drugs to numb the pain, but that doesn't help the problem go away. Not asked the right questions is an opportunity missed. This was one of the only times that your partner wasn't around, so you could have taken the risk. And whilst this is all going on, you have been doing your absolute best to raise your son. Petrified to say anything to anyone, as they might blame you and take away your purpose in this life. Your son is what gives you the strength to endure another day. His love for you reminds you of the beauty you can create. You feel guilty for exposing your son to this, protecting him as best as you can, but this was never part of the plan, and the power has been taken out of your hands. The school have noticed a change in his behavior, but they put it down to poor parenting. They feel as if he needs more discipline, and maybe you're not fit for this. You're starting to feel more and more accused, like the walls are closing in and everyone is pointing a finger at you and no one's pointing a finger at them. You want help, but how can you be helped, and where do you turn to when the person you're trying to run from is living with you? They know everything about you and have made it impossible for you to escape. Like looking for an exit in a maze, and every turning you take, you end up back at the same place. You overhear conversations of people gossiping about you, limiting your room to speak up. Meanwhile, your partner's threats linger in your head, monitoring every move you make from when you wake up. They tell you no one will ever believe you and it's all in your head. And if you dare make the wrong move, you want to leave. But that would mean leaving behind your home. And why should you lose any more than you already have when you have done nothing wrong? Besides, where is there to go? Housing options are so limited. And how will you feel safe moving to somewhere you don't know? They tell you at the desk, well, if you were really desperate, you would just go. There's an undertone insinuating that you're lying because you don't look like a victim, and you're trying not to attract attention to yourself. You're actually trying to seek help, but not in an obvious way. You have to be discreet because it isn't an easy step to take, but it's a slap in the face getting turned away. People don't recognize the signs. Their lack of action and understanding is like taking the side of your partner's side. Maybe they were right. You're tired of repeating yourself, reliving your trauma. Your cries for help are falling on deaf ears, and you are stood in front of blind eyes. And you overhear someone say, well, why don't you just leave? Minimizing your experiences to a decision you didn't make. You have tried to leave. You're caught between a rock and a hard place, and it's proven easier to stay. Until one day you see a poster, a leaflet, overhear someone that sounds like they understand. You feel a warm hand reach out, a reassuring voice call out, asking you, are you okay? Do you feel safe? It's not your fault, so you shouldn't feel to blame. Unfortunately, this happens a lot, so you shouldn't feel ashamed. And finally, you feel believed, listened to, and seen. You feel like you can breathe. Someone actually cares about me. You feel like someone understands that you can't do this on your own, that you are tired and traumatized and you've been trying for so long, and that you've been the best parents to your son considering what's been going on. You need someone to walk with you, not just to tell you where to go. You need people to explain the process. Don't assume that you just know. You need someone that appreciates the guts it takes to speak out and not ask you to repeat yourself. It's not easy asking for help. You need safe spaces, familiar faces. You need choices and calming voices. You need the power and control of your own life back in your hands. You need people that understand and learn, and in turn constantly improve their responses. You need your partner to feel the consequences of their actions and be held accountable. And then you need everyone to know that this is never acceptable, and it should be taught in schools so we break the cycle, to teach people no one is entitled to have power and control over you in a relationship. Create an environment that prevents and protects, and survivors of domestic abuse are our biggest assets. So to the question, why don't you just leave? I really, really hope it becomes that easy. But until then, think before you speak, and believe me when I say the question we should be asking ourselves is, why do some people find it easier to stay? Thank you. That was my poem, Why Don't You Just Leave? And that was obviously inspired by all of the experiences that people shared with me. Thank you so much. And also just widen our views and attitudes towards domestic abuse. But enough from me. And I feel like we now need to hear from the voices of people that have experienced domestic abuse. So this is now over to the video from the survivors panel of the Domestic Abuse Commission. Thank you.
The whole time I was living through it, I just felt angry inside. It made me feel that I was worth nothing. It was extremely suicidal at one point. I was always being told that I weren't good enough. For me, I was accused all the time of like cheating on him, and it was never the case.
I experienced a lot of verbal, mental, emotional, financial abuse throughout my pregnancy. I was 18, and then it got physical when my daughter was born. He put me in hospital, so the attack was like that bad that I got rushed to hospital. And I remember like going into that, you know, that machine where they check and see if your body's like, I had to check if my skull was fractured. And yeah, it was really, I was only like 19, so I was still young. Like when I look back now, it's like 19, you're still a child, really.
My experience was having to go through years and years of not getting any proper help. The only kind of help I received was parenting classes from social workers. No help on awareness about domestic abuse, no help about any sort, not even police. Everywhere you turn, you didn't get no help. So I felt like, you know, it's not that serious. It's more, you know, it's normal. People don't take it as serious, so it's okay. You know, that person's not going to get in trouble. And obviously I was younger then, so I just carried on that mind frame, and I just kept getting into relationships that were abusive.
My ex had pushed me away from my whole entire family, all of my friends, except for two. And if it hadn't have been for them, I really don't know. He had moved his siblings in to my home and had left my children into just one bedroom.
I was around a lot of girls like my age that were going through worse than me. So it became like a norm. So it was a thing where, okay, at that time, I wasn't physically getting abused. And you know, like we have this misconception of abuse is just physical. So all the verbal, the mental, emotional, the name calling, accusations, all of that. I was like, oh, he's not beating me up, so it's not that bad. But having people in my life to show me like, this isn't normal, this behavior is not like what you actually, this is not the standard, this is not the tone. So having people to show me and just that voice of hope in my life helps. To anyone who thinks domestic violence and domestic abuse is normal, it's really, really not. Domestic abuse is very dark. It's a big darkness. That's the only way that I can describe it. When you are being broken down mentally and emotionally, verbally, that healing process can take years.
I think there needs to be a lot more awareness in the community. Recently, I had a friend tell me that she's been hearing this girl screaming from another building, and no one from her neighbors have called police or anything to get help. You know, we need more awareness. I understand that some people feel shy, or the person might find out it's them that called, and have more issues. I understand that, but there has to be a way for other people to be able to help someone when they see that they need help.
Overcoming my journey through domestic abuse was so hard because I didn't have a name for it. I was having trouble with my eldest son, so I just went to the school and I said, look, I need help. Like, if not, things at home are not great.
What helped me when I was experiencing domestic abuse was going to Ava group.
Through Ava program, I'd met my friend Kat. I didn't go to the first meeting. I went to the second one. It took me a lot to open up, and when I did it, I just opened up. Kat's told me that by me doing that, it made her open up and made her feel comfortable.
So I was able to open up about a lot of things, and I was able to listen to her and take in what she was saying to me. And it opened up my mind about where I need to be standing, and that I know that I'm important and that I should care about myself first and then think about my kids and everybody else. Because if I'm not okay, my kids won't be okay, and my life will carry on being like how it's always been.
I was meant to get like therapy and counselling, but like the waiting list to get therapy and counselling took up to 6 months. And by the time that 6 months had come, the service said that I didn't actually reach the mark for any counselling. So that was like a big, like, whoa, like I've been through all of this as a teenager, and then for you to say that I don't qualify to get any therapy or counselling was a bit like absurd for me.
It took months and months to finally get a call back, and I truly believe that that's only because of my support worker pushing that forward for me. But I feel like as if more therapy is needed. I think it was 12 weeks, 14 weeks, I don't quite remember, but it wasn't enough, and it isn't enough. I feel like Barking and Dagenham Council they definitely need to work more with the police, and the police need to work more with the council. I feel that survivors in this borough are not heard often enough, so I believe that having a coffee morning for survivors would help us.
I think it's important that Barking and Dagenham have multiple, I'd say like facilitators, awareness. This is the borough that has the highest rate of domestic violence. There needs to be like people on the ground, like actually doing family intervention, crossing boundaries, because there's this whole, we've got to keep up this level of professionalism and but when people are so super vulnerable and families need real intervention, real, practical things, workshops, sessions, consistent sessions, like just that real engagement. And yeah, I just feel like there needs to be more of it. So I feel like as a borough, we need to break the silence, talk and create safe places for the community. Don't matter who you are, your ethnicity, your age, whatever. Like, there just needs to be more safe places.
We get a second chance. Not everyone gets that. And for me, I was an empty shell, and now I'm making something of myself because I'm doing it. There's nobody else doing it for me. I'm doing it, and I get that second chance. So, in a way, I look at it as a blessing for what I went through, because I get to rebuild myself, and I get to rebuild myself bigger and better. And so will you.
Thank you so much to our amazing survivors panel and to Amelia for that incredible poem. And those women have really led the work of the Commission. They have really educated us, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for the bravery and courage that they've shown as well in sharing their stories with us, which is not an easy thing to do by any means. I'm going to open up the Q&A now. So just to say, please do post questions in the chat. I will try to direct them to the right person. We have a couple of people from Buckie and Dagenham Council as well, elected members, who I'm going to direct some questions to. So the first question I'm going to take is, Buckie and Dagenham has a very diverse and vibrant community. Indeed it does, and I referred to that in my bit earlier. How can we create change around domestic abuse in all communities in the borough? And I'm actually going to ask Councillor Ashraf to respond. I think we've got a couple of questions along this sort of line. So Councillor Ashraf, would you mind just responding to that question? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Polly, and thank you for the question. The report, has, a chapter on culture and communities, which find that although there is a need to make domestic abuse more visible in all communities, that, there are additional barriers for those to come forward. And the Commission is keen to stress that, I quote, for everyone to play a role in making domestic abuse more visible, it is vital for communities to be encouraged to speak with their own voice. Specific messages should ideally be community-led and authentic, as well as survivor-led. And the Commission recommends, the seed funding for faith groups and the wider VCSE partners to own their message, related to domestic abuse. But also, this Commission recommends a community ambassador scheme to train up community champions around how to respond to domestic abuse. So I think it's fair to say that different communities will have different ambassadors to take the message forward. It's also, important to say, which, in this commission, that the Commission noted that communities act as the first line of defense for domestic abuse, and a survey of survivors run by Wearside Women in Need in 2020 asked survivors who they're told about their domestic abuse, and 62% of survivors told a friend or family member, and also before they told anybody else. So, only 11% of survivors first told to the police, and only 4% of survivors told a specialist service first. So listen, I mean, we've heard from survivors here, and for those who know me, they know that, I've been through this. It's extremely hard to come forward and talk about it or share about it. So, and it's always better to come forward and speak to like a friendly person. And this was also, reflected in the Commission's own research, with, lots of survivors never wanting to talk to professional at all. And I know myself, I never even wanted to share it with my family either. So, you will need to have a pool of diverse, ambassadors and community representatives. Yeah, so I think, I will leave it there, but I'm happy to touch a bit more. But the Commission itself, I think it's a fantastic read, and a lot to learn from, but also a lot to do for us, especially as a borough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashraf. That was a great answer, and that's right. So what we've recommended in the Commission is very much trying to empower communities themselves to become safe spaces for the survivors that are within those communities. The second question is, and we've actually had also a couple on this theme as well, and it says, all too often, police do not think a person is being abused. This goes back to the whole "we believe you" theme, doesn't it? Is Barking and Dagenham working with the Borough Command Unit to inform police officers to have training on how to detect domestic abuse? This was quite an important theme, as you can imagine, that we dealt with in the Commission. And I'm going to ask Councillor Mullane if she wouldn't mind responding to this question. I'm pretty sure Councillor Mullane is there and available.
Hi, thank you, Polly. Yeah, I'm quite happy to answer that question. The report makes many recommendations for lots of partners, and as Councillor Ashraf has just said and Polly indicated earlier, it is an easy read, and you can get a whole picture of what the Commission is about from sort of reading it in depth. I think what comes out loud and clear with the questions tonight and from the survivors, and we believe you, is injustice, and we have to listen loud and clear. So it doesn't matter what we think, what the police's response is. We believe what the survivors are saying to us, and it can be at times different police officers, different forces, that kind of thing as well, respond in different ways, which isn't really the way forward. The Commission has recommended training for the police on domestic violence, and I'm very pleased to say, and Councillor Warby alluded to this, that Sophie Linden, the Deputy Mayor, has very interested in this for us, has taken a huge interest in it, and myself, Councillor Warby, will be approaching Sophie Linden to look into an all-round good training for the victims of domestic violence. Also, as well, a strong theme that comes across from the survivors, aside from injustice, is domestic violence when it's treated in the judicial system, that the kind of what people who are perpetrators of it, how they're getting is a less kind of conviction than, say, somebody who is in a gang or something like that. So I think the Commission has done a brilliant job. Everybody has. We're listening, we believe you, we totally get the injustice that you feel, and this borough will do everything in its power to make sure that the recommendations happen, as Councillor Warby alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for responding to that question. I'm going to take the question about schools next. So the question is, can the Commission help educators in our schools to deliver a message to our children that says hands are not for hurting, and make sure our young people know we believe them too? So this was an incredibly, I'm going to take this question if people don't mind. This was an incredibly important theme that we dealt with on the Commission. We were very clear that children are victims of domestic abuse in their own right. They're not just secondary victims, they are victims. We were really lucky to have as a commissioner Amna Abdul-Latif, who has a huge amount of experience in working with child victims and survivors of domestic abuse. And she advised us, she played a very active role in the recommendations in this area, which is great because she's really one of the main national experts on this area. And we have made some strong recommendations about the implementation of relationships and sex education in the borough, how thorough that needs to be. We believe there should be young ambassadors specifically to be able to support children who are experiencing domestic abuse. We are have a look at the report because there is a whole theme about schools and the way in which we believe they need to work with children and young people in order to both educate and also support. And one of the key things that's come out, I think, of the work of the Commission is it's really important to both listen to and believe children and young people and provide education about safe relationships, but then also to make sure that support is accessible to those young people. Because if you talk about domestic abuse and healthy relationships in a school, you will then get disclosures and young people coming forward for support. And that's part of our principle about not doing any harm inadvertently. It's really important that that support is there and available once you start providing education about healthy relationships and domestic abuse. Another question is, do Barking and Dagenham hold safeguarding sessions so that the community knows what to look for in domestic abuse? So Councillor Ashraf actually touched upon this. We are recommending a community ambassador scheme. That means that there will be individuals from across the very varied and diverse communities of Barking and Dagenham who get proper training and will then have a level of expertise in domestic abuse that then make those communities much safer spaces for survivors to disclose. So the community ambassador scheme will make sure that within communities there are individuals who understand domestic abuse and who can make that "we believe you" a reality. So we're recommending a significant public awareness campaign within the borough so to create that level of awareness of the "we believe you" message, but then beneath that is a real safety net of community ambassadors and people who are much more directly empowered to actually provide support and signpost survivors to where they can get support. We've got another question about how can you help someone who's experiencing domestic abuse but doesn't want help at the moment? And I think that is a really important question because a lot of the time survivors, victims and survivors don't feel ready to come forward and they don't feel ready to talk. And I think one of the main emphases of the Commission is how do we create a community that is ready to listen and believe and signpost to support when the survivor is ready to come forward. And so I think rather than thinking about what can you specifically do for somebody, it's more about staying with that person and making sure that either you as a family member or friend to make sure that person knows that as soon as they are ready to speak, it will not be a wasted opportunity and you will be ready to listen and believe. but also creating a community, because not all survivors want to talk to their own family or their own close friends about something that they're experiencing that is so personal. Many do, but some won't. So it's about also creating that community that will be ready when the survivor's ready. But also, if we change the community, hopefully survivors will be ready sooner as well to speak out, because we know from national statistics that survivors have experienced on average 35 instances of abuse before they alert the police. What we need is communities that are ready and have the right culture so that survivors will be able to seek help long before that 35 incident level, which I think is quite shocking. We've got a question for councillors that I think I'm going to put to Councillor Warby, if she's all right with this, which is, how will councillors ensure that this report's recommendations are brought to life? Councillor Warby, are you all right to respond to that?
I'm here. Yes, I'm trying to turn myself on. Yes, I'm fine. We will do a comprehensive report of our response to the Commission. I can tell you now, we'll accept we accept fully the recommendations and endorse everything that's been said. But I think the question's quite right. How do we make that real? You know, rather than it just coming as a report to the council, what steps can we do? How can we work with our survivors and the wider community to make these things happen? It's not just a document that we want to see sitting on a shelf. So one of the challenges we'll be working with our staff going forward, the whole staff team across the council, is we're going to make this commitment, we're going to accept these recommendations. How does that work? How do we make it happen rather than just be talked about? So it's a very valid question. We have to go through the process. I have to get, which I know we will, full council, 51, sign up to it. And then the challenge is, yes, make it real, make it happen and see some results. I would love to sit here in a year's time and have those 4 survivors, those sitting here saying to you, do you know what, things are so different? And we will, as Councillor Ashraf has said, we will make that difference and we'll make it happen. Thank you, Polly.
Thank you. Well, that was obviously music to my ears, that answer, Maureen. So thank you very much. I should actually say, when Maureen talks about that accountability to survivors, one of the things we've recommended in the report is that the governance, ensuring that the recommendations are implemented, should directly include survivors in that, so that in a very real way, the council, just as we as a commission have been accountable to survivors, the council itself will be accountable to survivors for making sure that the report is implemented. And that was something that survivors themselves and our survivors panel felt very strongly about. Another question I've got is, we haven't mentioned domestic abuse against men, and that is absolutely right. We haven't specifically, although in the word survivors, I absolutely do intend to include all survivors in that, just to be absolutely clear. We do know that the vast majority of victims of domestic abuse are women, and an even greater majority of perpetrators of domestic abuse are men. Having said that, it is really important that we don't act as though domestic abuse only happens within heterosexual relationships and only happens with male perpetrators and women victims. Clearly that is not the case. Have a look at the report, because it absolutely does clarify that, and it also does talk specifically about domestic abuse in the LGBTQ+ community, which is quite a hidden issue, we are quite honest in the report, partly because of the onset of the pandemic. We didn't do as much outreach into the LGBTQ plus community as we would have liked to do. We did do it. I don't want to say we didn't do it, but we recommend that the council does more of that, because if we're talking about community ambassadors within different communities, and we do say that in the report, we're not only referring there to the different ethnicities within the borough, we're also referring to as well other different communities, and particularly LGBTQ plus people. I'm just looking through my questions here. How do we change the perception of abuse within the public, especially around verbal and psychological abuse? So I think I might ask Nicole, if you don't mind, Nicole Jacobs, I can talk about this till the cows come home, but I think everyone's probably getting a bit sick of the sound of my voice. Nicole, would you be able to respond to this?
To the issue of psychological abuse, sorry.
Yeah, how do we change the perception of abuse, that it isn't just physical? I think that's what's behind the question, that often domestic abuse is verbal and psychological.
It's a hugely important thing for us to try to do, because if we listen to so much of what we heard tonight in the survivors who gave just such incredible poems and spoken word to us, that's what we were hearing, is all these signs that we often overlook or we minimize, and others will minimize, and certainly the perpetrator will minimize. So one of the things that we know from all sorts of practice, from homicide reviews all the way through, is how much we will overlook non-physical abuse. We tend to still think, after all of these years, that that domestic abuse is about physical abuse, sexual abuse, and we, despite the fact that we have coercion and control legislation, which defines in law the fact that that's not the case. In fact, the domestic abuse bill gives us a definition, a statutory definition for the first time of domestic abuse, which will be a step forward. And that defines domestic abuse for all of what it is, including financial abuse. So on the face of the bill, we have that, and children affected in their own right. So there's a lot of structural ways we can look to that maybe we didn't have before, that can help reinforce that. But I think you're right. The whole ethos of this event is, how do we raise public awareness? How do we talk to each other? How do we open up opportunities to really feel that we can raise these issues? And it is about training. And it is about public awareness. And I think it is just, there's probably no total simple answer, but I think we have ways now that we can use, whether it's legislation or research, just to the best effect to help reinforce those things. But I think it is on the basic level about communication and recognizing and being able to say, you know, what you're telling me, what I can hear, what you're telling me is happening to you, that sounds like domestic abuse, because we don't often bridge enough those conversations where we're making the link of the behaviors we're seeing to the idea that that's domestic abuse. And the reason why that's so important is then people don't get the help and support that they need. So it is about all of us on this call, all of us thinking about ways that we can have a comfort level talking about these things. We can you know, say that we're concerned when we see some of these behaviors, the non-physical behaviors described, or we see the jealousy, the controlling nature of the relationship, and being able to say, you know, this is what is, you know, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about you. And are you safe? And are you feeling controlled? We need to kind of widen our vocabulary about how to do that. And that's in all frontline services. But as you're saying tonight, very, very important in community settings, coffee mornings, all of the things people have talked about throughout the last hour that would really help improve that dialogue. So, you know, this event in and of itself is really an important step forward. And I've just really noticed the chat I mean, I spend my life, I feel like, on events, and this chat tonight is really engaging in a different way. And so I think it helps us learn as we go, like, this is the kind of thing we need to be doing more of. I hope that helps, but I don't know that it's a one answer, that a one kind of point answer.
No, that was great. Thanks, Nicole. And I think I was hoping you were going to refer to, which you did, the definition in the bill, because I think that is really important, actually, that it explicitly involves, it explicitly includes non-violent, non-physically violent forms of domestic abuse, like financial abuse, and in particular, of course, coercive control, which isn't a type of domestic abuse. It is the heart of domestic abuse, and I think Amelia's poem really expressed that so powerfully, that control is really at the heart of domestic abuse. And I think the recommendations we've made about, I keep talking about the community ambassadors, that's really important. Another one is to actually provide budget for survivors to be able to set up their own groups, and to make sure that where there's a lot of housing development going on in Barking and Dagenham at the moment, to make sure that where there is new development, there are spaces where survivors are able to meet, and then that the council is able to provide just a bit of seed funding just to enable survivors to get together, but also communities to get together in an environment of we believe you. It doesn't have to be explicit who is a survivor and who isn't. It's about just being able to have these conversations so that if you're a survivor, and when you become ready to say something, you know that you will be believed. There's just a question. I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to wind up the Q&A. But I do want to just thank everybody for the way people have participated in this event on the chat, by thanking our survivors and our other speakers. It's been absolutely brilliant and so empowering, and yeah, so thank you. Just one more question, which is about workplaces. Because that is really important. And one of the things that we urge the council to do is to work with employers in Barking and Dagenham to make sure that they have proper policies in place. And actually the council is really leading the way on this. So the council has a domestic abuse policy that is you know, it's excellent. We are recommending in the commission that everyone in Barking and Dagenham has training on domestic abuse, and that is quite detailed, so that we really make the council, which is of course one of the biggest employers in the borough, an exemplar of what workplaces can be like. So if other employers in the borough want to know what they can do, all they have to do is look to their local council, for example, for an example. And that to me is what every local council should be, actually, an example of domestic abuse awareness, training and excellent employment practice, so that other employers in the local authority area can look to them for an example. And some of that, as well as being about understanding, it's also about, you know, making sure, just to go back to the last question, that everybody understands that domestic abuse isn't just physical. If you're waiting for, you know, a colleague to come to work with a bruise so that you can kind of leap into rescue mode, that is not what it's going to be like. It's going to be about those much quieter conversations. So I just want to thank all our speakers again from me, but just to formally close the event, of course, I'm going to hand over now, it's goodbye from me, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Darren Rodwell, who is the leader of Barking and Dagenham Council.
Thank you very much, Polly. I have to say that I sit here with immense pride, because I'm not the leader of this community in the way that the old-fashioned thinking was. I'm a facilitator of this community, and the empowerment of the people that I've seen on this very call tonight. The testimony was as strong as I expected it to be. The passion was heartfelt, painful to anyone that feels about fellow human beings. I can't thank enough the Commission, Polly, yourself. I can't thank enough Maureen for leading this with support from Margaret, Saima and other colleagues in Cabinet and the Council. Flo, again, you have been exceptional. What I come to expect from officers of Barking and Dagenham when it comes to help deal with difficult issues. 5 years ago, we did something no other council, and I believe still today did, which we did the Gender Equality Charter. And I did notice that someone did ask about men. But actually, this commission has been very clear. A victim is a victim, no matter what sex. But we have to acknowledge the vast majority of victims in our own data show that they are women. And it's awful to think that a single person has to live in that abusive relationship in ever guise it comes. And worse still is the children and what that means to them in their young lives and how they will come forward. So it's upon us all to make sure that we listen. It's upon us all that we learn. And it's upon us all that we talk about the situation. Over 500 residents and professionals took part in this commission. That is phenomenally incredible to have those people come forward. And again, I'm very aware of the statistics. It is the largest crime we have in this borough today. Those numbers will not go down unless we together make that happen. And that will only happen if we work with every single person who comes forward. So I'm really proud of today. It is another one of those special moments in this borough's history. And the reason being is we have empowered the powerless, because that's how people feel. And I know this from talking to many survivors in their situation. We have to wait until they are ready to come forward in whatever guise that comes and whatever abuse they are feeling. But I know that we are one borough, we are one community, and we will certainly make sure anyone who is a survivor of domestic abuse will not be left behind. The other day, it was International Women's Day. This was very appropriate because actually, as I said before, the vast majority of victims are women. And this borough recognises the month of March for International Women's Day, and we put on events to commemorate that, whilst doing many things across the year. And I said these words on that day: we respect the women of our past, we encourage the women of our present, and we plan for the women of our future. Amelia, your poem sent shivers down my spine. I was so in awe in how you was able to describe such a difficult subject, and I would ask that be sent to me so I can put it out publicly and say, let's talk about this. Jasmine, your spoken word was so powerful. I'm proud you are part of this community and you have the strength to speak up and speak out. I believe it's important that we as the council lead in this. And I also believe, and I know Councillor Bright's on the call, where Barking and Dagenham Business Forum, we should do a special piece of work on that, because we know that 2,000 businesses in the borough will link into the forum. So we can get that message out there about how we collectively can support victims. Lastly, I would ask that everyone thinks about where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow. And together, we must all say to every single victim, no matter in what way they come forward, we believe you and we're here to support you. So thank you to my marvellous leaders in the council, members and National Commission, but most of all the survivors, the people that will help us develop a service that will support everyone in Barking and Dagenham. Thank you, Polly.
Thank you everyone for attending. Please check the report out. Have a good evening. And thank you to Darren. That was great, really great.